Welcome to the Thinking Legal podcast with me, David Kerner. This is a podcast about the human and psychological aspects of the legal sector. I run The Marketing Legal, a legal marketing agency, and you can find us at www.themarketinglegal.com. I hope you enjoy the show. Today we're joined by Roshni Thakrar, who's legal counsel at M&G, and also a speaker on DEI and host of the Prim Rose Light podcast. So welcome, Roshni.
Hi, David. Really nice to have the chance to speak with you today.
Excellent. And I think probably to begin with, it would be nice to hear about your journey into law, a bit about yourself, and also, as you're a fellow podcaster, maybe you could tell us a bit about your podcast and how you got into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess sort of taking on law and kind of my journey into becoming a lawyer. I mean, it certainly wasn't an easy journey. It's certainly one where I worked and persevered incredibly hard. So just sort of briefly, I read law at City University. I graduated in 2010. And as many of your guests might remember, 2008, 2009 was the financial crash. So it was a really difficult time for hopeful sort of aspiring trainee solicitors to get their training contract. So being a second year university law student, that is sort of the years that you'd be applying. So I absolutely struggled and was sort of victim to that. So I certainly found, trainees were being deferred, places were, reduced, and it was a really, really challenging time. Even though I felt I'd done kind of a lot of the right things, I'd done the mooting, the pro bono, the volunteering, was on track for 2-1, it was still incredibly difficult. I do, however, look back and think, oh my goodness, I'm not surprised I didn't get the training contract because my applications weren't quite as strong as they could have been in terms of, I think, the way in which you kind of presented the experiences you had. But, you learn with time, and I guess I finessed that as the years went on. So I sort of did law school, and then I contracted for a fair few years. So I contracted for about 4 years. Small, medium, large organisations, in-house, in law firms, did a really kind of broad array of legal compliance stuff. Really enjoyed that, had some big names on the CV, and just really wanted to use that experience to sort of propel me to get that elusive training contract, which finally came in 2015, and I was delighted. But I guess, when I sort of trained, kind of had a bit of a question mark as to kind of where I wanted to qualify, what I wanted to do. Chose to become a pensions lawyer, which I've enjoyed. I think it's a really positive area of law to work in. It's rooted in something positive. Everyone wants to have something to retire and look forward to when they want to come up to retirement. So I liked it was something quite positive. I liked that. It was an intellectual discipline. I felt that pension lawyers as a bunch were very warm and kind. And I guess I sort of then made various tracks to sort of to do that. So I did an FTC at Zackers. I'd gone to DAC Beechcraft, had a wonderful boss there, really enjoyed my experience. So I guess I'd certainly moved around, as the years had progressed, to kind of having done what I'd done in my, pre-training experience. I'd sort of done the whole kind of contracting stuff, and then I kind of thought, well, look, I want to look for a proper permanent job. So that's where I went to DAC, and then I went to Stevens Harwood, and then as you said in your introduction, had wanted to go back in house, having done so much of that prior to my training. So I'd been at M&G really for quite some time. I finished up there now, actually. So wanted to kind of cement my experience and look for that kind of new opportunity, but I guess kind of positioning myself more as a sort of a regulatory lawyer, not just a pensions lawyer. So I think I've been able to broaden out my experience, and now it's just kind of looking for that next opportunity that will kind of really appeal and actually use my skill set and kind of further sort of the initiatives that I sort of champion, of which DEI, which I'm sure we'll come on to speak about in a moment, certainly encompass. But yeah, so I guess I've really embraced my legal journey. It's by no means been an easy journey. I think the law can be full of various challenges, difficult people, different
Absolutely.
intellectual vigor, complications. It's never simple, but I'm very grateful to call myself a solicitor, and it's certainly not something I take for granted. And I think we've got to be that beacon of light, haven't we, to sort of shine and kind of take people on that journey. So that's very much sort of a bit about me. But I guess on the podcast stuff, so Prim Rose Light, as you mentioned, my podcast sort of started off over COVID. I was seeing a few friends in Primrose Hill. We were having a nice meal, and we would.
Oh, that's where the name comes from.
Yeah, well, sort of actually. I'll explain about Primrose Hill. I mean, Prim. Everyone always says, "Rosh, you're very prim and proper." My auntie calls me Rose, and light. Roshni means light in Hinduism. Oh. So it was a bit of a play on kind of Primrose Hill, and then kind of also personal kind of little anecdotes and reasons as to why Primrose Hill turned to Primrose Light in this case for my podcast. So yeah, I guess as I said, it sort of started over COVID, really with an idea to kind of enable people to feel like they were two people, a bit like you and I, having a really nice conversation. Obviously, it was a time of great uncertainty and loneliness, and people didn't necessarily know, when the world was going to sort of come back to some sort of sense of normality. But I really wanted to use this opportunity to kind of inspire, educate, and really the aim of the podcast is to cultivate a conscious community. And by that, what I mean is a platform where we can explore important topics: mind, body, soul, spirituality, other very sort of topical subjects, be it ESG, climate change, dynamics for women. Can they have it all? Is it possible? What do good relationships look like? Meditation. So it's very, very broad and ranging, and it's something I've loved and really want to grow. Obviously, I've talked about neurodiversity, which is another big subject we're going to come on to talk about, and it's really just an opportunity to educate, to inspire, and really connect with nice people, and hopefully grow it into a big kind of community where we can, learn off one another and collaborate.
Yeah, that's one of the lovely things about podcasts. Actually, you kind of you're able to speak to loads of people with kind of loads of different experiences, and like around that you can build a community, and there's a bit of like satisfaction around that. I find it's really nice.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, and so you mentioned kind of neurodiversity, and you're quite open about your dyslexia.
Yes.
So how's that kind of woven through your kind of career journey, and what kind of experiences have you had, kind of both positive and negative around it?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, David. I mean, I am really open about it. I mean, it's worth sort of letting your listeners know. I only found out about my dyslexia a few years ago, back in 2022. So it's certainly quite a new sort of journey for me that I've been on. I was told as a little girl that I might be dyslexic, and I had a special needs teacher because I'd get my B's and D's mixed up. But ultimately, I outgrew getting my B's and D's mixed up. So my parents never got me tested, and I think it's kind of gained in prominence sort of from the 90s onwards. So I would have masked, like is so common for particularly women and girls. And I think I have always tried really hard. I mentioned that, with my training contract, it was far from easy. It was a really difficult journey to get to that. And I guess I've always felt I was a product of perseverance and hard work. And I guess that has probably been a theme for my whole career, that I have to work really, really hard even to work as a lawyer. So I didn't necessarily know about the whole neurodiversity stuff until I got tested. And it really came about from some feedback that I'd received, and kind of continuous feedback. And I thought, well, this doesn't make any sense. I'm trying really hard here. And I feel that I'm just not quite getting the results that I wanted. Where is it going wrong? So I essentially got myself tested, and I'm really grateful that I did, because it did indeed confirm a diagnosis of dyslexia. I very much view it as a positive. I think it's part of knowing who you are, and I think we have to embrace that. I don't necessarily get I don't think I necessarily want to get really caught up in the labels. I think we need to accept people. My genuine view is, be it man, woman, black, white, neurodiverse, neurotypical, I think we should strip away those labels eventually, but I think they serve a purpose so that we can understand that we, have perhaps minority groups that have particular challenges, and we need to kind of acknowledge, hear that, upskill ourselves, educate ourselves with a view to making it better, so that then the labels become irrelevant and we can just see people as is. And I think arguably that's a bit of a spiritual point. It's a bit of a we're all people. If you bleed and I bleed, we all bleed red.
But I think it's also quite an important point as well, because I recently had a conversation with Connie DL, who's one of the co-chairs of the Legal Neurodiversity Network, and one of her points was that law firms, and I guess you can generalize this into other businesses, should be inclusive by design, and that kind of speaks to your point about actually kind of these labels mean something, but actually the kind of these organizations should strive to be inclusive, whatever someone's individual needs are. Is that something you would agree with?
100%. I agree entirely with Connie. I think we have to, it's a bit cliched, isn't it? Bring your whole self to work, bring your authentic self to work. But actually, very often, the systems at play aren't there to enable you to do that, such that you mask, right? Yeah. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's why those labels at this moment are important. But let's not kind of just tick the box so that we feel like we've done something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think you also kind of touched on your experiences as a woman in the sector, and what are some of the issues that you've seen around kind of women in that women face?
I mean, I think there's many challenges for people of all minority groups, but I think specifically women, I think that kind of juggle of, do they have to be better? I think often women have to outperform, men. I think that's quite well known statistically. Obviously, there's a lot of unconscious bias. People recruit people that look like them, and obviously, if you've got, and I don't like to bash, the white man, because I think there's absolutely a place for them, and I don't think they should in any way lose the opportunities, but it's, can they empower and champion other people to also have those opportunities, so that you can, you can't be what you can't see. So I think we need to create that environment where all backgrounds are celebrated. But I think for women in particular, obviously the motherhood penalty, often women, as their careers are developing, they're at a point where they maybe want to have families. And that is often in opposition with your career also developing, and kind of, I think there's a great amount of work that's been done around flexible working. I think COVID was a bit of an accelerator for some people being able to work, or some organisations really leaning into that. But I think we are also falling back into bad habits of kind of, we need you in 3 days a week, 40 days a week, 5 days a week. And it kind of seems like, well, is there a real reason for that? Are we just going back into it because the white male, perhaps has a wife at home who's going to look after the children? And how does that fit in with women who are working and also want to progress in their career? So I think we need to really be conscious as to why we're doing that. I also think, if I'm being honest, perhaps slightly controversially, are women also slightly masculinized? Are we actually leaning into some of the feminine energy that we have? So I think often in this corporate world, to succeed, and again, I'm talking more specifically about law, there's perhaps quite a particular standard that you need to be in. Perhaps that goes a little against what it means to be a woman, which is a bit more nurturing and a bit more softer. Whereas, the law is typically quite hard. It's very factual. There's litigation. There's a contract. We've got to negotiate it. There's transactions. It's not very much leaning into that feminine energy. And I think we're seeing that in society. So it's like, again, it's a bit of a holistic point, but I do think there's a point around, we're kind of pushing against the natural grain. How can we actually slightly soften the profession? Not to say that it needs softening in the sense of, women can't, don't have a place in it. It's like, how can we actually get women to the table to talk about what the issues are, to then make, appropriate adjustments to again, accommodate that. So I think there's a couple of things. I think, obviously, as I mentioned to you, being a pensions lawyer, which I hadn't mentioned actually earlier. But I know when you and I were speaking, I talked to you a bit about the gender pensions gap.
Yeah.
So not only have we got a gender pensions gap or a gender unequal pay problem, we've got often a disability gap. We've got an ethnicity pay gap. And again, all of these are different layers. So I'm speaking to you as a woman of colour, and a woman who is also neurodiverse. So I think the intersectionality and thinking about each individual's each personal characteristic that makes you up as a person and then a professional needs to be dissected into the workplace, and think, well, what challenges might these particular groups be facing, and what can we do to reduce those barriers, essentially. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings me on to kind of the next point is that what are some of the things organizations and individuals can do to address these challenges? I know that that one of the things you mentioned is that kind of these changes need to be made. How can organizations and people within them affect change? I think something that I've kind of noticed in the last few years is that there's been a kind of rise in sector-specific networks, and obviously I mentioned the legal neurodiversity network. Do you think they have a role to play? And what other things do you think people can be doing?
It's a brilliant question, David. I mean, I definitely think, I really champion the work the LNN are doing. I've attended a couple of events. I want to get more involved. So I've reached out to say, look, I think I could contribute a lot kind of with an in-house perspective, given that's been my more recent experience as sort of someone who would be a client, to these law firms, but also as someone who's neurodiverse. And it's worth mentioning, I co-chaired our network at M&G for the Neurodiversity Network. And I was very kind of vocal about kind of where I thought things could be better. And I think it's almost recognising and honouring that every organisation is at a point, good or bad, but let's acknowledge where we are and then how can we move forward, because really only then can you drive change. So I absolutely think there's a huge amount to be said for employee networks coming together. I certainly felt there was an implicit understanding with other neurodiverse colleagues in this particular setting, or the LNN, what are the struggles for lawyers, be it in-house, in private practice, or trainees at any level, paralegals, whatever it might be. How can we identify those? And I think the truth is that, I think there is in many organisations, there is a desire, but I think that there is also some organisations that don't really think that it is as important. And I think the interesting thing with neurodiversity is it really goes to the heart of the way you do your job. And so therefore, obviously you need to, in law, make those provisions. It's the right thing to do commercially, ethically, and also just for the well-being of your employees, because there is obviously a mental health crisis that we have on our hands, and often law, people in law have amongst the worst mental health, and it's unsurprising to me. So I think it's a real opportunity if law firms and lawyers and the profession more generally really acknowledge it. And actually that's why I'd in part left M&G to go on and sort of form my own consultancy. As I was doing more in this space as a neurodiversity advocate, I could see that there was quite a lot of things to unpack, to unearth. And I guess as a lawyer, where you understand what the Equality Act says, the process of making adjustments, what does that look like? How can that help people? What is good culture? I guess kind of for me, I've always kind of liked personal development. I like public speaking. I kind of felt like actually this could kind of marry a lot of the things I care very deeply about, and actually use my voice to really advocate for those that maybe don't have the confidence to, or perhaps they're nervous to shine a spotlight on their experiences and their difficulties. So, David, what I would say is I think there's absolutely a place for people to be celebrated. Everyone is unique, and I think there's a space for everybody, because if you've got to wherever you are, you have got some capability, and let's not put people down. Let's enhance the stuff they're really good at. Let's give them more of that. And can we also create opportunities to suit that particular individual, because there's a genuine need for it. So it's kind of that fine balance of, are people just trying to get away with everything versus actually there's a genuine need and a provision that we can put in place, an adjustment that will actually enable this person who actually can give us a lot of value. Let's give them more of that stuff and take away the stuff that they're less good at, because actually typically we operate in a more team-like structure, and so therefore there are other people that might be able to do the stuff that we're sort of pushing onto someone who just is maybe not going to get there to the same level, but let's sort of hone in on their superpowers. So I think it really depends, I guess the point is, David, on everyone's individual neurodiversity, which obviously can be multiple. There can obviously be different neurodiversity conditions attached to someone, but it's kind of, what does that person need? Let's have an open conversation, and then joining, I think, different networks, and starting your own employee group, or feeding back your experience to HR, DE&I, even more senior, whatever the size. I think there's absolutely an opportunity, and I think we need to talk about it more. And I think that's why I said, I've set up the consultancy very much to sort of make things better in my own way.
Well, I'm really interested to talk about your consultancy. So kind of what inspired you to start that, and how do you think you're going to kind of achieve your kind of goals with it?
Good question, David. I mean, I'm still very much, I think, in brainstorm mode. I guess what I would say is it had come about very organically. I guess, as I mentioned, with my diagnosis and my experience, I really wanted to see how I could make things better for others. As I said, I recognise being a lawyer, you're perhaps in a more privileged position in that what your entitlements are, and I pushed quite hard for the adjustments that I thought might be helpful. But I think there's a few points to that. You can only do all of that with psychological safety, managers being very supportive and understanding as to what neurodiversity means. And then actually it kind of being top down. So actually it being a focus for, certainly your manager has to get it in your team. But I think if it is spoken about kind of board down, or, head of the team down, it kind of helps sort of filter down that kind of cultural ethos point. So I think that's kind of what I really wanted to focus on with my consultancy, to sort of say, well, look, this is how you support neurodiverse talent. It's not, this is what you need to do. It's actually, well, what do you need? How can I support you? And I think if you can do a little bit of that, I think if you invest a bit, you're actually going to get a lot back. But actually often, David, you might appreciate this point. Often what is good for neurodiverse individuals are actually very good for neurotypical. So actually It's just good practice that you can create a very nice culture. And I really strongly feel, David, that if you invest in people, then they are more likely to want to stay. Often, why do people leave? They leave bad managers, or they leave bad cultures. It's less. And actually, if you're able to tackle that problem, then anything that law firms and the profession is putting into you as the individual, you're probably likely to reap that benefit, because you've actually built respect, trust, and a sense of loyalty. And so I think that you can't really put a price on that. So I think that would be the work that I'd really like to focus in on. And also, I think, empower those neurodiverse individuals to use their voice positively, to say, this is the support I need. These are the sorts of adjustments, and recognise it is a journey. So, I think it will be something I will, want to encourage all different people to take up, whether you think you might be neurodiverse, you're a parent to neurodiverse children, you think you haven't been diagnosed, you have been diagnosed, to managers, to organisations. I think at this moment I'm still building the different strands to it, but I guess what I really have enjoyed doing is kind of going into different organisations, talking to them about my journey, if neurodiversity, what does good look like, what can be some of the challenges, and what might be some reasonable adjustments, and actually to highlight some of the superpowers, whilst also balancing that it is a disability under law. And so we can't brand everything with a very, rosy picture. There are inherent difficulties, and we have to be honest about them with a view to making those better, because that's the whole point of adjustment. So that's certainly part of the work, but I welcome people's, feedback as to what they maybe want and would find helpful. And I'm, very happy to sort of think about how I might be able to service that. So I'd say it's all quite early days, but I've enjoyed, joining various panels and being on talks. And, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come on your podcast and talk a bit more about my experience and, how I could hopefully add some value with a genuine desire to make things better. Because as I said, it's the right thing to do ethically, commercially, but, I think it will really reap positive benefits for everyone.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think is quite an important point, and that's that not all kind of neurodiverse people will have had a diagnosis. So therefore, kind of if a firm kind of puts in place a structure that's more inclusive anyway. I think that rather than making kind of adjustments for particular lawyers, although that's important, that they can make life easier for everyone at the firm. Not everyone will want to advocate for themselves as well. So I think that's actually quite an important point.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I found actually, that you don't necessarily want to be the spotlight. And again, why is that? You know, there is a stigma. Oh, you're neurodiverse. Oh, you're dyslexic. Oh, you're stupid. You can't read. Obviously, that's completely far from the truth, because thankfully, you know, I can do lots of things and more. I can do some things probably even better than very neurotypical people, but there's going to be some things I struggle with. And that's the case with everybody. We're going to have strengths and different, you know, and things we find harder. So I think it's not about shying away from them. I know where my areas for work are. I'm very happy to work at them. But actually, how can my employer or how can my boss help me to redress that? Or could they give me more of the stuff I'm really, really good at? Because actually, I'm going to knock that out the park and maybe give me a bit less of the stuff I'm less good at, but nurture me through that. How do they nurture me? How do they give me feedback? How do they build that confidence in me to feel able and confident? And am I given support? Or am I just left to sink or swim? You know, I think all of this stuff can be worked through, and I feel really, really strongly about it. So I really hope that we can make positive strides in the profession. As I said, I think there is a mental health crisis, which has always existed in law. It's just, I think now we're talking about it more. And I think neurodiversity and mental health probably do go quite closely together. And I get it, right? Work is such a huge part of everyone's lives. You know, we've got a cost of living crisis. Life is challenging. You know, I think work can offer you a place, a bit of stability, you know, give you structure. But it can also be a place that is quite hard to navigate, you know, politically, or, you know, you might take things very literally, or, you know, you might be socially awkward, and, you know, all these things kind of can feed into it. But if we can create conversations where actually other people then are coming in, being the guinea pigs, saying, well, actually, this is what I struggle with, then it at least provides an opportunity for you to say, I really resonated with that talk, without maybe you being that kind of center of attention. And that can even help, you know, hopefully start a conversation if it hasn't already happened. But yeah, that's my hope, and that's, I guess, the work I'd started, and hopefully that's making a bit of a difference.
Yeah. And now, kind of the difficult question, or I'm asking you to be an oracle here. So feel free to kind of answer this however you'd like. But where do you see the sector, or where do you want to see the sector in the next 5 years, and what do you see as kind of some of the issues coming down the road?
Well, it would be remiss of me to not think about or say AI and, you know, tech probably amongst the very first. I think there's a huge opportunity with tech. Obviously, I think there is a question mark as to, you know, how our roles are going to be changed as people in the legal profession. I think some of that churn work, I say in sort of inverted commas, will invariably go. And I think that means that actually lawyers are probably able to do the more exciting stuff. I actually strongly feel, though, the neurodiverse community are very well placed to tackle actually that stuff, because often they are the more soft skills, you know, people, you know, collaborators, the leaders, the visionaries, the people able to spot problems in a different way, the unique thinking. So I actually think that there's a real opportunity for the neurodiverse community to really shine. They just need to be given, I think, the platform to do that and to feel understood. But I'm hopeful that, you know, AI and tech will facilitate people's jobs in a more helpful way, so that they are able to record conversations, to summarize them, to, you know, finesse emails, to, you know, record phone conversations and give you the summary. And I think all of that is really useful, and people spend countless hours, you know, doing some of that stuff, or, you know, some of the low value, you know, NDAs, or, you know, commercial contract agreements. So I think there's a real opportunity there. Obviously, the key kind of idea being around, you know, is the quality of what we're putting in, and then sort of what's coming out reflective, is it accurate? So obviously I think there's still around, you know, a bit of legal risk there to manage in terms of, is the output correct? Is there any risk around that? But I certainly think it's an opportunity if managed appropriately. I also think that DE&I will continue to be on the agenda. Again, my strong view is rightly so. I think there are lots of groups that have done some really positive work to move the needle on many issues, but I think we still walk at, for some things at quite a glacial pace. I still maintain I think neurodiversity is one of those in the vast majority of cases that I've seen, but I think it is getting better, and I'm heartwarmed by hopefully the momentum that people continue to bring around it. But I think it's really important, and I think customers and different stakeholders across the different levels are insisting upon it. I think that's the right thing. I think we've got to get away with greenwashing or DE&I washing just so it all looks very glossy. What else do I think? I think we're getting better at the kind of mental health stuff as well, and kind of this FaceTime culture. So I hope that will improve. So yeah, those are a couple of thoughts. I don't know what you think, David, if that hits some of the notes that you'd be thinking of too.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. And I kind of reiterate the kind of importance of DEI and inclusion. I think as you say that will probably become kind of higher on the agenda for kind of leaders as well, simply because more people are receiving diagnoses later on in their career. And also kind of the challenges that firms are coming up against with technological innovation will require kind of more diverse thought, and the skills that neurodiverse people bring with them, I think, are definitely going to be very helpful for firms, and they need to recognize that. So yeah, absolutely agree with those points. Yes. So Roshni, thank you very much for joining me. It was really good to kind of hear you speak about the subjects that you're passionate about, and I hope people can listen to your podcast. So that's Prim Rose Light. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Oh, thank you, David. No, thank you for the opportunity. And yes, if anyone would like to reach out, please do drop me an email. It's roshnithakrar@hotmail.co.uk is probably the best place to start, and I can give that information to you, David, and make it happy for you to share it. But yeah, very happy to help have a conversation if you're neurodiverse, if you're a business that needs some support in how to improve the culture. Very happy to have a conversation how I can support, and obviously feel free to check out the podcast Prim Rose Light, which can be seen on and found on Spotify and all other main channels. So yeah, no, thank you very much, David. It's been a really nice conversation.